Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you this morning. So today I'm going to start a series of talks on the Heart Sutra. And the Heart Sutra is the heart of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. It's a small section of it. And of course, we chanted it this morning during service, and it's chanted daily in Zen centers around the world. It's a very essential teachings. So I'm going to have about 6 or 7 talks on the Heart Sutra, and I'll just go through it. But today, all I'm going to talk about is the title of the Heart Sutra. And we announce it. We say Maha Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra. It's announced by the Ino. And in Japanese, it's called Makahanya Haramita Shingyo. And it's exactly the same. So I'm going to look at the title, and the first word is Maha. Maha. And Maha literally means great or big. Okay. So if we translate it into English, that's what it would be, Maha. But it's not just our normal sense of big, like a whale or a mountain. It's so big that there's no outside. Can you get your head around that? Something so big that there's no outside to it. And then we'll take it a step further. There's no outside means there's no inside either. Because what's inside and what's outside? So we say everything is one body. That's the nature of reality. But we have to experience it in order for it to be our living reality. It's also what we call emptiness, a state of emptiness. It's when the self disappears. And when the self disappears, the other disappears also. So the circle becomes infinite. And when there's no outside, everything is no other than the self. But as we've talked about many times here at the Zen Center, and this is a basic teaching of the Buddha, that there is no self. So when there's no inside, no outside, there's no self either. The self disappears. So what we consider to be the self is just a mental fabrication of something that we identify as the self. What is a true self? Well, one of the cautions is not to transform the notion of self to the notion of no self. Then we've created the self again. So I know what myself is. It's no self. And so then we have something that we're holding on to, this thing, we call it no self. But well, you know what Dogen said? He said to study Zen is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self. So forget the self and forget the no self. And if you forget the self, then you're enlightened by the 10,000 dharmas, or enlightened by everything. Then your whole life is the enlightened life. The problems arise when we start interjecting this notion of who I am, and then we try to protect that or aggrandize it. Or some people get a lot of traction by pitting it. Nobody's a bigger victim than I am. So anything that we hold on to causes us problems, so we have to forget it. So that's Maha. And then the next is Prajnaparamita, Maha Prajna Paramita. Well, Prajnaparamita, as the Roshi Shinko reminds me, is the mother of all the Buddhas. She's a great mother that is the source of all creations, Maha Prajna Paramita. But let's break it down a little bit. Prajna is translated as wisdom, the wisdom of emptiness. It's nothing but the functioning of Maha, which is the one body. Or sometimes we say it's everything as it is. That's Prajna. And the first half of the Heart Sutra, which we chant, explains what Prajna is, what that wisdom of emptiness is. And the second half explains the functioning of the Bodhisattva who realizes that Prajna. And we'll get into as in the subsequent weeks when we talk about it. Then let's look at Paramita. Paramita means perfection. It's one of the perfections of the Bodhisattva, the one who lives their life in accord with the enlightened way. But it also literally means having gone to the other shore. So you could translate Prajnaparamita as the wisdom which takes one from the shore of delusion to the shore of enlightenment. Okay? That's what paramita means. But there's 6 paramitas, and we've talked about them before. One of them is dana, which means giving or generosity. Sila, which means discipline or precepts. Shanti, which means patience. Virya means effort or energy. Samadhi, meditative concentration. And then prajna, wisdom. And all of the paramitas arise from Prajnaparamita. But any one of them can take you from the shore of delusion to the shore of enlightenment if you practice it fully. Dana, giving, generosity. If you have a giving, open heart, which isn't stingy, which doesn't resent sharing, and patience, shanti. If we're really patient, do we get angry? I think anger has a lot to do with impatience or disappointment, maybe, and why we're disappointed. That's the amazing thing is we never know how things are going to turn out, how our life is going to turn out. So we get impatient. I want this now, or I'm disappointed. But sometimes disappointment, turns into, approval or joy. Everything is impermanent. It's constantly moving. So Prajnaparamita is a wisdom that takes us from the shore of delusion to the shore of enlightenment. And Prajnaparamita is the great mother that brings awakening to everyone and everything. And then the next word is heart. The heart is the seat of our being. The expression of our life arises from our heart. And what kind of a heart we have determines how our life manifests. You know, and much of our wisdom arises from the heart. You know, we have conceptual wisdom, it's conceptual understanding, but the wisdom that arises from the heart is not conceptual, it's intuitive. And when we practice Zazen, when we practice in the Zendo, we practice Zazen in our life, it's imperative we listen to the wisdom of our body. What is our body telling us? Beyond words and letters. And the heart of our being is the heart of not knowing. Is being able to be present. Some of the people who are most anxious and tense in life are those who want to know everything. They want to have everything under control. And I think one of the greatest things I learned from my Zen practice is how to be comfortable with not knowing. Can we really be comfortable with it? Each step we take is a step into the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We can make all the plans that we want, and I'm not discouraging anybody from making plans. But plans don't always work out the way we want, and then we have to adjust. You know, like this GPS, they're pretty smart. You take the wrong road, and it adjusts. You know, it says, and if it's really smart, if you take the wrong road, it shows you how to use that wrong road to get to where you want to go, is your destination. But even that destination, you know, that's just a temporary thing. I was just talking this morning with one of you about experiences that we have in practice. Whatever experience we have, sometimes we have marvelous experiences. We just have to learn to move on. We can't stay in that place, then our life becomes static. I learned my lesson well when I was first started to practice, and I was in my 20s, around 24 or something like that. And if you do the math, that was 56 years ago. And I read the 3 Pillars of Zen, and I read about the enlightenment experience of one of the students of Yasutani Roshi, and it turned out to be Yamada Roshi, who was one of his successors. And I said, wow, I want that. I want that experience. That's what I want. And I spent 6 years trying to have somebody else's experience while I was meditating. Or if we have a wonderful experience and then we want to recreate it. I remember going to a session many years ago. Actually, I remember the year, it was in 1972. And it was with the Edo Shimano Roshi and my first teacher, Sochu Suzuki Roshi, in Litchfield, Connecticut, in a retired nun's home. They had a session there. And there's this one guy who was so particular about everything that he wouldn't let anybody, when they cleaned the zendo, wouldn't let anybody touch his zafu. His zafu had to be just at the right angle and everything, because he knew that if he sat like that, he would have these most wonderful experiences, you know. And so when we have an experience, we try to recreate it. We want to sit down in the right way. We enter the zendo and we sit down and we fold our robes in exactly the same way. And we sit, make sure our zafu is the same. Well, is that what creates whatever it is that people think they want? You know. But as you know, anything you think awakening is or enlightenment is, whatever you think it is, that's not it. But it reminds me of, I used to be a big baseball fan, and there's a lot of superstition in baseball. people have to eat the right thing, or they have to. There was a pitcher, I think he played for the New York Giants. His name was Sal Magley back in the 50s. And they called him the barber because he would never shave before he was supposed to pitch, because it was bad luck if he shaved, So everybody has their superstitions about, if I do this and that. But it's spelled out very clearly in the Paramitas. That's all we have to do. You just pay attention. Just be attentive and not judge. So judging comes from a sense of knowing how things should be. So if we let go of judgment, we let go of knowing, and we just step into not knowing. And I think if we're really clear about stepping into not knowing in our life, stepping into death is another step into not knowing. I mean, Yugen works with the hospice in Boulder. You can see that those people who are just willing to let go at the end of their life, and just willing to let happen whatever happens, are the ones who have the most peaceful passing. But the ones who are holding on because they want to know are the ones who have the most difficult passing. So there's anything to be learned from its practice. It's how to really step into the unknown, moment after moment after moment. And then the last word in the title is Sutra. So what's a sutra? So literally, sutra means the warp, as in weaving. There's a wolf in the warp. I don't know. I'm not a weaver, but I have had friends who weave, and there's the warp are the lines that I think holds the carpet or the tapestry together, and then the design is made on the warp. So the sutra allows the pattern to emerge, and so this pattern, of course, is the pattern of your own life. So that's what the sutra is. Now, let me just say a word about chanting, too. My teacher used to say that you don't chant with your mouth, your tongue, and your lips. You chant with your whole body. You chant with your ears, particularly. If you're in a room with a bunch of people, how do we harmonize many voices to be one voice? And how do we really put ourselves into our chanting? There's a koan that we have. It's in the miscellaneous koans, and it goes like this. It says, it's called the Aji koan. It says, to see Aji koan clearly wipes out all the 5 grave sins. To gain results by true words, this very body becomes Buddha. So it's a verse, and then as a koan, you have to present your understanding of it. So Aji, G is kind of an affectionate suffix, but it means sound or word, Aji. So the sound of the word ah. And in English, when we start chanting the Heart Sutra, the first word in the chant is Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. So the first syllable is ah. So when we chant, it's ah, vola, ki, to, each. We just totally focus on it. And so what this koan is saying, that if you totally put yourself into your chanting, it wipes out the 5 grave sins. There are 5 grave sins in Buddhism. I could actually enumerate them, I think. One of them is to cause disharmony in the Sangha. That's a grave sin. And if you commit a grave sin, you immediately are reborn in hell. Immediately. You know, there's no intermediate states. You just go fall right into hell. So causing disharmony in the Sangha is one of them. Killing your mother, killing your father, killing an arhat. An arhat is an enlightened being, or injuring the Buddha. Those are the 5 great sins. So if you have committed one of the 5 grave sins, or even if you haven't, but if you see clearly Aji, it wipes him away, and you realize that this very body is a body of Buddha. So how do we realize it? When you chant Ah, what else is there? That Ah becomes Maha. And there's no inside, no outside, just that Ah. And that Ah covers heaven and earth. And all of the heavens and all the earths. And as Roshi Shinko points out to me, Ah, that's the mantra sound of the Great Mother, too. Ma'a, Ma'a, Great Mother. Ah. So in that case, it's Ah. When I was studying with Socho Roshi, and was my first teacher I met in London, he did a little skishi calligraphy for me, and he did an enzo, which is the circle, and then underneath it he wrote A, B, C, D. And his English was very poor. After he wrote it, he showed it to me, and he said, "What is? What is?" You know, and I interpreted that as, "What is it? What is?" And I said, "It's letters." And he said, "No letters. What is? No letters. What is?" And years later, I realized he just wanted me to go, A, B, C, D. That's what is. And when we chant the Heart Sutra, it's Maha Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra. And each syllable contains the whole Heart Sutra. Each syllable. If we totally express it, right there is Maha Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra with that one sound. And I found this quote of Dogen. He says, "Once the heart of our practice is grasped," the heart of our practice, this heart, once we grasp the essence, the source, the heart of our practice, you're like the dragon when she gains the water, like the tiger when he enters the mountain. So they, in China and Japan, they believe that the dragons lived in the bottom of the ocean. You know, that's their domain. You know, that's where they were free. And when the tiger enters the mountain, totally free. In other words, when you grasp the heart of our practice, you're entering the realm of your true self, unencumbered and free. And he says, "For you must know, right there in Zazen, the right Dharma is manifesting. The right Dharma is manifesting itself. And from the first, dullness and distraction are struck aside. Traps and snares can never reach it." So what is the heart of our practice? And where do we find this true freedom, this true expression, where we don't get stuck in snares and traps? You know? And we're not distracted and we're not dull. You know, here at our center, all of you practice koans. Some of you just sit, shikantaza. Shikantaza is literally means just sitting practice, just sitting. And that's just awareness, pure awareness. I like the expression Jeff told me is choiceless awareness, just open to everything. And some people think they're doing shikantaza, you know, when they're just sitting, not particularly focused on anything. But I'll tell you how to practice shikantaza according to Yasutani Roshi. Because he said when you practice shikantaza, you should totally be aware of everything, not just sitting there unaware, but totally aware. And he said it's like walking in a crowded marketplace and you have a jug of water balanced on your head and you don't want to spill a drop. And there's children running around and animals, you know, like in these ancient marketplaces, there's donkeys with big baskets full of peppers, you know, and merchants and all of this noise and distraction. And you're balancing this big jug of water in your head and you're walking through the marketplace and you don't want to spill a drop. You have to be careful. And if you're too relaxed, you know, if you'll spill it. If you're too taut, somebody just bumps you, you know, and the reverberations will go through and you'll spill it. So you have to really be careful. And he said, but it's even more serious than that. He said, because walking behind you is a soldier and he has a drawn sword. And if you spill a single drop, he's going to cut off your head. That's how he said to do shikantaza. So that should get your attention. You're going to be aware of everything around you. That's the heart of our practice. But non-judging, just aware. You don't judge these children for running by and these dogs barking at you while you're trying to balance this big jug of water. Or merchants calling out, trying to make a sale, or running in front of you with their carpets and saying, good value, good value. Come into my stall. Have I got a deal for you? And you have this big jug of water in your head and there's a soldier walking behind you. You know? But can you be relaxed at the same time? That's a challenge. That's the challenge.